For those of you listening in via the recording, I am the SANS Career Placement Specialist, and I work with graduates or members of our SANS cohorts on resume development and review, soft skills identification, job plan development, and interview prep and mock interviews. I would also ask you all that are listening at home to grab a pencil and paper if you don't mind. I also know that I speak incredibly quickly. I apologize for my Yankee upbringing. I'm working on it to try and slow my speech down. So if at any point it gets too quick, please let me know and I will slow down. So go ahead and grab that pencil and paper if you're able. If you're in the car or listening via audio, no need to worry about it. You can come back and listen to the recording later or just make mental notes. I will also have a question and answer section at the end of this. While you're listening, if you have any questions, please feel free to jot them down and I'm happy to answer them at the end of the presentation, or you can email me and I'll have that information available for you as well. So back to the idea of personal branding. This, of course, comes from marketing and suggests that is obviously implied. You are your own brand, just like Coca-Cola, Nike, Brad Pitt, Martha Stewart are all brands. The idea to focus on is that your personal brand, as this picture illustrates, is the intersection of how you see yourself and how others perceive you. So it's important to focus on the fact that we are trying to manage other people's perception of who we are. So why do we want to do this? Well, you have a personal brand already. I'm sure you were all aware, right? Every interaction you have, whether online or in person, leaves people with an impression of you. And this is slightly different than your reputation because it's based on more than just your work product. Your personal brand is going to have implications for your personal life as well. So it's not just people that you interact with professionally, but also friends, neighbors, literally anyone that you can possibly think of. And the whole idea is to ensure that this perception is one that you have created and that it is beneficial to your end goals. If you would like to be a CISO in 10 years, or CISO, however you would like to say it, that's something that you need to be aware of as you work towards developing your brand. Additional things you might want to consider, and probably are already, are the clothes you choose to wear, your hobbies, your volunteer activities, even what you like on social media, all inform other people's opinions and beliefs about who you are. So how do we use this in our job search? Well, being aware of it means that you can help have your network accurately depict and express who you are to other people. By being clear about what you have to offer, you also allow others to extol the value of your brand. Think about one of your favorite actors, athletes, or CEOs. How would you describe them? You can do this in your head. Have you ever actually met this person? Most of us have not met the person that we're thinking of, or we have others that we know of we haven't met. But many of us have a positive or negative view of them based on how we perceive them. Let's use the example of Steve Jobs. I feel like this is one that we're probably all familiar with, right? When I think of him, I think of the words entrepreneur and genius, right? The iPod, revolutionary. But so does arrogant and rude and awful attitude. And those are the PC terms that I'm thinking of when I think of Steve Jobs. So, what does that mean? And why does it matter to you? What is your personal brand? Is what I said and I mentioned previously, is what others say and think about you. Well, I'm sure no one here would mind being referred to as a genius, and I'm sure many of you are. I personally would not like to have anyone refer to me as rude or arrogant. But what I do want others to think about is how kind I am, or my professionalism, my outgoing nature, or that I'm easy to talk to. So, what do you want others to think about you? Many of you probably have already started crafting your personal brand by describing yourself in your executive summary section or in your resume or on your LinkedIn. Additionally, I'm sure that you've also attended some networking events in some professional capacity, or are a member of a group or club where you've had to introduce yourself to others. What helps define you in these people's minds, right? How would friends, family, and acquaintances describe you? Often this is based on some level of education, life experience, or personality. Before people even meet you, forming opinions of you based on how you interact with others and them. Some people it can be based on how you speak and your level of education. And oftentimes, these indicators provide preconceived stereotypes that you can choose to reinforce if they're beneficial to your end goals, or that you need to be aware of in order to work against them if they're not something that you want associated with your personal brand. Some of you can choose to focus on life experiences that have helped to identify or define fundamental aspects of your personality. Even the most basic information about where you come from can have a very significant impact on how people perceive you. Let's take an example of this, because often I find it's easiest to understand principles when using examples. So let's describe a real life person that I know. This person works in healthcare, is from New York, and is highly educated. So make a picture in your mind of this person. Just those words alone often cause you to have some sort of a feeling about them. Now let's add in additional information. This person is female, is from upstate New York, not New York City, so a pretty big distinction there, and works in alternative healthcare, something called Ayurvedic medicine, after having left behind the more typical Western medical practice. So do you have a different picture of them? That's the purpose of the personal branding. It's the work to ensure that the information you provide through your interactions provides an accurate and beneficial picture of you. If this individual was applying to, say, a more traditional healthcare practice, they would probably focus on the first description of them. Both are accurate, but one is misleading. Make sure that your brand is very clear about what you have to offer. So let's move into actually defining who we are. Remember, some of this is going to be based on both your in-person and online persona and interaction. I don't want you to just focus on social media, as there is so much more to us than obviously our social media. But I do want you to be aware that social media, GitHub, online forums, YouTube videos, all of that also contributes to your brand perception. And so you need to be aware of how your brand is perceived based on those interactions as well. So if you have that pen and that paper, now's the time to bring them out. We're going to have a fun exercise. I'm sure you all are so excited. So first, what we're going to do is write down how you would describe yourself. This is going to be in terms of leadership or technical abilities, right? It can be your personality, your presentation. It can be any perceived negatives about you in a separate column, if you'd like, right? Some other things to consider are, what do you most enjoy doing? Are you an extrovert or an introvert? What are your hobbies? Where are you from? What jobs have you held in the past? What did you really like about those jobs? Why did you not like those jobs? For those of you that are transitioning into a completely separate field. Do you like working with people, or do you prefer working on problems and thinking through them on your own first? Are you funny? Are you loud? Are you shy? How would you describe yourself? I'm going to give you another minute or two to start thinking about these. I don't want you to overthink this. This is kind of like a word association. Say me, and then any of the words that come to your mind. I have done this exercise myself while you were working on this, and I have definitely been surprised by a few of these answers. I have always thought that I was much more on the shy side. I am one of 5 children, and I am definitely not the loudest of any of my sisters. But that is not how I'm perceived by people outside of my circle. People within my circle would compare me possibly to my sister, who is a professional opera singer. Compared to her, I might be considered shy. But usually, and to the average person, I'm definitely more outgoing. I enjoy talking and learning about other people, and it's always something that I seek out. Another example can come from my spouse. They're usually pretty reliable for their honesty. So I tend to think of myself, or I did, as a realist. And this is in terms of being pessimist, realist, or optimist. And I was surprised when I found out that that is not how I'm perceived. I always think through all of the plans and try and plan as much, aware that the worst can happen. But I tend to be very positive about thinking that it's possible for me to resolve those issues, and I have a can-do attitude. This translates to people as optimism. So while you've done your list, and feel free to continue to add to it as you feel appropriate, I want you this Thanksgiving holiday, if you're able to, or over the course of the next few weeks, to ask friends, coworkers, and family that you trust to be honest. Remember, don't pick people that you know are going to be afraid to offend you. You need the honest feedback. And ask them how they describe your personality, management, technical abilities, presentation. Give them a few categories in which you'd like to have their input. Make sure that these people do not talk to each other. It might be best to just have them write them down. It shouldn't take more than a minute or two, and most people will be more than willing to help you, especially if you let them know that it relates to the job search. So, when you think about how the world perceives you and how you perceive yourself, you might find that there is a discrepancy, right? Just like I mentioned. So, how do you fix this discrepancy? The most important thing when looking at your list is to realize that it is important to stay authentic. You should not feel the need to exaggerate or become a different person because you think it will sell better. Instead, try to figure out what makes you unique. You don't need to say that you're an experienced IT professional when in fact you've used point of sale systems for 6 months back in college. Obviously, this is dishonest and will not lead to a positive feeling towards your brand. Your life story and characteristics make up who you are. You don't need to try and modify or change them. What you can do is practice how to get them across in the most appropriate way possible. Additionally, many of you will have the same technical certification, but not a single one of you will have the same life story or will have the same experiences going through the program or even the same background that led you to cybersecurity. Your story of how you came to cybersecurity is an important aspect of developing your brand. Maybe you found that you've always been passionate and been pursuing it as a hobby since you were 12 years old. Maybe your dad and you or your mother and you used to tinker with servers in your basement. Or you might be a career changer that's done 15 years in a different industry and found that this is something that you were good at and never thought was possible and were surprised at how much you enjoyed it. Be sure to think about these experiences and how you can communicate them. Let's take an example of this about why it's so important that we consider this. So oftentimes I watch competition shows. That includes the Olympics, or what is my favorite competition show of all time, the British Baking Championship. It's on Netflix for any of you that have not considered it, and it's pretty quality. So what I love at the beginning of these shows and as they go throughout, you learn about the contestants, and in fact, almost all competition shows you'll watch provide a bio about the contestant to get you as a viewer vested in that person. Your brand is going to operate pretty much in the same way. It's going to give people an opportunity to become invested in you and your success. So when you walk into your next job interview, for example, your experience with cyber talent is going to tell future employers a lot about you. Think about, did you work full-time or were you a student full-time while completing this program? How much time has it taken you to get your certifications? Remember, 4 to 6 months in this program is a very quick timeline, especially to be receiving 2 to 3 GX certifications. Did you have a home lab? Have you been doing extra activities? Did you struggle with certain things and found that you were able to reach out and overcome obstacles on your path to getting your certification? And it's important to be open with some of this. Remember, no one needs to know your whole life story. You're not going to start any job interview by saying, I was born on Tuesday in August of 1989. No one cares, but they do care about investing in a good story and good success. For those of you that are shy, oftentimes it can be very difficult to talk about ourselves or communicate who we are to people. And even those that are outgoing sometimes struggle with this. Remember, a little bit of vulnerability and honesty goes a long way in making you approachable and helping you stand out. For example, saying you are new to cybersecurity and how much you've enjoyed learning, but recognizing that you have a long way to go makes people aware and want to help you. This is important as well because it's practicing self-awareness. This is not to be confused with self-criticism. Oftentimes when we're learning new things, it can be very hard for us to accept how difficult it can be, or we can be overly critical. The job search process and career development are critical processes. You are constantly being critiqued and reviewed, and sometimes when things don't work out, it can be very upsetting. It is important throughout this process to understand why and how you are unique. This helps you come across as more competent and confident and will ultimately lead to greater career success in the long run. So now that we've figured out how we're going to start developing our brand, let's talk about specifically how we're going to communicate. How are we going to get across our brand points, who we are and what our value is? It needs to be consistent. So if you want to be perceived as a team player or a collaborative member, remember that how you tell and live your story is going to provide proof about what you say you are. So how you work, live, play, speak, these are all going to be contributing to how you're perceived and how you communicate your brand. Remember when you are speaking to try and keep things attention-getting and relevant. Additionally, in the cyber/tech world, your work product is going to have a huge impact on how others perceive you. So being active on GitHub, maybe having a blog or other online presence, have you participated in hackathons or capture the flags, or even YouTube videos that you may have done. These also allow others to get a sense of you and your technical competencies. They also will be considering how you interact with others and your personality throughout these interactions or postings. So be conscientious of how this reflects on you. Additionally, the most obvious ways to communicate your brand that you're going to be finding that you use fairly often throughout the job search process and your career development are going to be things like your elevator speech, your professional summary. You'll find that these in-person communications and almost every interaction that you have are going to be across your network, difficult at times, but they need to be consistent about who you are and what you have to offer. I would recommend that you take opportunities whenever possible to practice these speeches or to practice getting across who you are and hone the ability to speak concisely about yourself when appropriate, as you're going to be required to do so far more often than you may think. This may be just throughout the course of your job search process during interviews, but also professionally at conferences once you're in the industry or working throughout, and doing client interface, right? There'll be multiple times where you'll need to demonstrate who you are and what you have to offer. Additionally, when you're communicating your brand, remember to deepen those existing relationships. So oftentimes people consider networking, and that is in fact partly how you're communicating your brand, about collecting as many cards as possible at a convention, saying, I met all of these people. But that is not what it's about. It's about developing and cultivating mutually beneficial relationships. You want your brand to be powerful and have people be able to speak to it when you are not around. So how did they perceive you? The best way to do this is to get to know people on a deeper level. You don't want to collect cards and then have 100 cards from a business conference, but not remember a single thing about any person that you've met. Likewise, you want people to remember about you. If you're spending all of your time collecting cards or connecting random connections on LinkedIn, they're not really getting a clear idea of who you are and what you have to offer. So it's fine to take the time to really work at developing those connections. Some people, it may take only a few minutes. Others, it may take longer. So now that we've talked about how to communicate our brand, right? Oftentimes the go-to is going to be the elevator speech. Let's talk about really how we're going to use this brand that we're communicating. So we've talked about embracing what makes us unique and our personal journey, right? But it's also important and to be aware of using the appropriate tone for the situation. An informal dinner with your significant other or going out with friends is going to have a very different tone than an interview or another formal get-together that's more professional. When interacting with others, as we all invariably do throughout the day, try to make a memorable impression. Listening to others speak and trying to make a connection or something that they know and care about is a way to help you be memorable. This is not going to work for every situation, but it also speaks to the importance of knowing your audience so that you can tailor your message. Let's use a marketing example since we are talking about branding. Say a European sports drink is looking to make inroads into the American market, and they've decided to start with a commercial. They're most likely not going to be using German or French soccer stars in their advertising if they want to be successful. And why not? Because most Americans will have no point of reference. Likewise, you need to be able to tailor your brand and your communication to the audience that you're trying to reach. The next step on how to use it is consistently. You will change over time, but most core aspects of your life and experiences won't. When you're speaking to technical individuals versus non-technical individuals, you're going to have to tailor your message and be able to communicate who you are and what you like to do to someone that may have never heard of pen testing and probably may not have updated their virus protection since 2007. You still need to be consistent about representing who you are and what you have to offer, and to be able to communicate effectively to people from a variety of backgrounds. This is important as your network includes everyone that you meet that can help you. Your neighbor's cousin's wife may have just the in that you are looking for at your dream company. Well, the person that you're speaking to recognizes that you work in cybersecurity and would love to connect you to their cousin's wife, right? This consistency also helps to serve to provide you with confidence, as you know what your value is, you know what your worth is, and you can communicate it no matter the audience. Now, I mentioned that your brand may change over time, and it probably will. As you start out in your careers, you might be working in a more technical capacity. This is normal, especially for those of you that are going to be trying to work in pen testing, etc. Most of you won't have the experience within the industry and move right into management. But as your career develops over time, you might find that you move up the ranks, and that management experience and leadership qualities might be more important to start emphasizing as part of your brand. This is fine, and this is expected. If you're aware of your brand, then you can be part of the process of guiding along that transition and change. It's also important to remember that you are not a robot. Oftentimes when I've worked with people in the past, they want to memorize a script for their elevator speech. And while it's great to know what points you want to hit, there's no script. You don't want to come across as a robot because that makes someone feel that you're talking at them and not with them. You do want to focus on the key points that you want them to take away and the overall message of who you are. But you don't have to use the same words every single time. And finally, how to use it that I think is part of one of the most important ones that oftentimes gets left out is to create value, right? While your brand focuses on who you are and what you have to offer, remember that it's equally important that you also think of how you can help others. People will remember you and your brand when an occasion arises to return the favor, and it helps them to invest in your brand success. For example, I had a client who was disabled and had been laid off from his position doing psychiatric exams on ER patients. He is in his 60s, and due to the nature of his disability, he could no longer work long hours and was at a point in his career where he was looking for something specific. Also, he did not want to take a pay cut. After updating his LinkedIn and letting some friends and former colleagues know he was looking for a new position, he was contacted by some people he had trained in the past and mentored, who now offered to put him in a position in their practice. They were able to hire him and meet all of his requirements. Remember that networking is still the way that roughly 70% of jobs are filled. So you take the opportunity when presented to help others. It adds value and investment into your brand success and increases the capacity for you to connect and make change. I hope these tips were valuable for you. And I understand that we went through a lot of information, and there's probably a lot on your mind and indexes waiting. Additional resources for you all, if you're interested, include TED Talks. I personally like these because they're so short and easy to review. One by Ann Bastianelli is called Powerful Personal Branding. Rob Brown, The Personal Brand of You. And there's a book called Women in Tech by Taylor Wheeler Van Black. And I recommend this. This doesn't talk specifically about personal branding, but it does speak to recognizing what your value is within an industry and has some great insights into how the tech industry actually works. I may not agree with all of the comments in them, but I think it's still a valuable read. And for those of you that need to escape from family for a little bit and the indexes are done and you're ready for your next test, or you've graduated from your certification, this is just a great read that I'd recommend in any circumstance. So thank you all for joining me. I wanted to offer the opportunity for any questions you may have. And if you don't feel comfortable asking now, please feel free to contact me via mshrewsbury@STANS.org. If I don't know the answer, then I will do everything in my power to find it for you or connect you to someone that does. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I hope you all have a happy day.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, you said that everything that you talk about right now, you're gonna have it on recording.
Yes.
I just want to know where it's gonna be located at, because I was driving and I was
Not a problem. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I will email it out to you either this evening or tomorrow morning.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you found something valuable.
Yeah, it'll be
It'll
be a Dropbox link, Maureen. I'll get that for you so you can distribute it to everyone.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks.
Maureen, I don't know if you saw in the chat, there was a question about locating tips for creating brand.
Oh, absolutely. I'm so sorry.
There's a few.
I didn't. Thank you. I'm sorry. What was it? Locating tips for creating brand logos. If you have any friends, number one, that work or have an artistic vibe or artistic hobbies, they're great. As far as branding logos, I don't know how much you're going to be using that specifically. Some people prefer throughout all of their written interactions to have a specific font that they use, and they will only use that font because they feel it associates them with that brand. Other than that, I don't know specifically within your career search how much you'd be using it. If you're starting your own company, of course, or something like that, then of course you'd want one. But as far as your job search, I don't know that you'll particularly have too much of a use for branding logos or within your career development. Okay. And what is a genuine way to project your future role without exaggeration? So it depends on what your future role will be. When you're doing your resume, if you have a title that you're applying for, like immediately, of course you can use that and say you're looking to move into the cybersecurity industry with a position as blank. Oftentimes analyst, whatever it's going to be. It's completely fair within the interview process, and I think it actually is admirable, and most people will like it if you say, in 10 years, they'll often ask you the question, where do you see yourself? And you can say, I see myself as a CISO, or I'd like to be a subject matter expert on Python use as it relates to something. A genuine way to project your future role without exaggeration really is to just say, this is what I want to be doing. It's often important to include the why. So don't just say you want to be a CISO, but say why. That makes people connect more to what your job goals are, and will probably invest in your future a little bit more. They'll want to see you succeed if they see you coming across as genuine and honest, like we spoke about previously, or I spoke about previously. I hope that helps answer your question, Michael. Are there any other questions? Absolutely, Jacob. So when you're moving or transitioning into a new industry with resumes, what I recommend is that you're going to be using something called a combination resume. Oftentimes, when you're working in cyber technology, they'll use something called a skills or a functional resume. And that's because what they're really concerned with when you're talking about the technical position is what your technical capacities are. Now, for those of you that are transitioning from another industry, and that includes IT, which pretty much all of you will be doing, what I recommend is including some of the soft skills that are relatable as well into your new positions. So for your example, when you're doing the actual position, you're going to be customizing your resume for every position that you apply to. So every resume should use some of the same basic ideas of who you are and what you have to offer. And that'll often be seen in your executive summary. And that is going to be used to generate interest in reviewing more in your resume. Oftentimes you get a maximum of 7 to 14 seconds for someone who's an actual human being to review this resume. So what you want to do is make it as simple as possible for them to know you and your qualifications. What I recommend, and I'm happy to send you some more information, Jacob, and for anyone else that's interested, is that you're going to have the executive summary, which is kind of give them a basic information about who you are and what you have to offer, right? So it can be your brand summary in a way. And then you're going to move into the skills that you have to offer. Now, these skills, you're going to list whatever technical skills are required for the position that you have. Oftentimes, it's also a good way to, or it's a good idea to also rate your proficiency. And I have an example of how to do that using a STAR method. In addition, after that, you're going to be moving into some of your professional experience. And when we discuss your professional experience, when you're writing the statements that fall underneath of that, you're going to be focusing on things that you've done in the past that also can demonstrate your abilities in your new role. So whether that be time management, ability to prioritize, multitask, all of those things are going to be valuable to employers as well. If you have any information working at a help desk, for instance, oftentimes that requires that you translate technicalese into human English, for lack of a better term. So your ability to do that is something that you should definitely be able to speak to on your resume, and that job experience is a place where you'll be able to do that. You only need to include the information that is relevant to the position that you're applying for. And that is for a civilian resume. For those of you that are interested in a federal resume, you're going to have a very different resume style. And I'm very happy to provide more information on both of those. And in fact, that might be a future topic for a webinar. So I hope that helps to answer your question. And Jacob, I'm very happy to work with you one-on-one to try and hammer out what is a good working resume for you. I know that that's a challenge for most people. And I will send all of you a copy of that information as well.